And I only wanted to bring it up because we're always creating something from nothing. We're always taking the resources that we have at our disposal and repurposing them and reutilizing them for something else that is powerful, positive, constructive, and what's needed at the moment.
Whatever you heard of me ain't worthy to me. I'm just too cutthroat, verbal surgery. How you claim to know thyself when your shelf's too high? I keep mine's at eye level. What you trying to hide? Peace, 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 beautiful family. This is Dr. Walter Hidalgo, and this is the Know Thyself podcast. The Know Thyself podcast utilizes the metaphor of the shelf in order to extrapolate the self. And the way we do that is we invite guests to come in and share something about themselves. And before I introduce my guest, want to shout out our sponsors. So I want to shout out the God Zanuj and his jewelry line. I'm actually rocking some of it here, Mikal, right here. The God makes these. So,
that's really dope.
So shout out to him. Shout out to my boy Rob. I'm rocking his hat right here. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to his line and his gear. So big up to that God. We'll provide the information on the screen. And to the God Steve and his 2020 collections. We're in 2021, but we keep that 2020 vision. You heard?
Nice.
And if you're looking for any coaching, any workshops, not only can you holler at my brother, but you can holler at us. Just shoot me an email, knowthyselftv@gmail.com, and we will, we can talk specifics. I also, before I forget, want to give a big shout out to the Virgin Islands. That's where I got this mask. I was there not too long ago, and boy, what a pretty place. Definitely recommend it.
Word. I will definitely be there when post-COVID.
So, exact facts.
Post-COVID.
So, as we always do, we also like to shout out a group of individuals. And today, I want to give a big shout out to all the lyrical monsters. To all my educators. In every sense of the way, however way you do it, because I always say, one of the biggest responsibilities in this planet is what and how you disseminate information into a child's brain. Because that's a reflection of the rest of their life, man. I want to give a big shout out to anyone who has ever stepped outside of their comfort zone. Because that's where you find the G-O-D. That's when you are reminded that you're the G-O-D. Big up to anyone that travels, that has gone to different countries. You can read it, you can watch it. I know now is an interesting time, but traveling, I think, is so important. And this speaks to my brother right here, because I got somebody right here that I love, that I respect, that I admire, and is a monster when we talk about lyricism. My brother Mikal, a.k.a. Hired Gun.
Peace. My man.
Yo, wow. Humbled to be here right now. So let's get right to it.
Okay.
Because time is spiritual, and this is happening in real time right now.
There's so many
family.
Gems. There's so many gems. Oh my. Okay.
All right. Okay. So,
okay.
As we always do, we like to contextualize this, and I always say if we were to jump into Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and go back in time.
Okay.
To a younger Hired Gun.
Yes.
What would we see? What would we hear? What would we smell? Because you're originally from? Jersey, stand up. Shout out.
Man, so first off, I've got to say, man, it is a blessing to have you here. We go back.
See, I'm not going to say how we met. It's going to come. It's going to come.
But, it's always a blessing to be in your presence, brother. Wow, man. So, a young hired gun wasn't hired gun. He was G-Rock.
Okay, facts. Speak on it.
And
yep.
I guess if not, aside from no longer having the locks, maybe a couple pounds heavier. A younger hired gun it's a lot of what you see now. I loved music. I loved knowledge. I loved information, and I really loved people. I love people. Some people when I talk sometimes I'll be a little tough on adults, and we will get into that a little later. My favorite people are young people, but I always was looking for community and friendship and fellowship, and wanted to be a part of something that felt bigger and greater than me. So I was always kind of on that path, That's really what actually just got me into the music, because my cousin, may rest in peace, Al Tariq, my older cousin, he was my dad's middle brother's son. And the irony is that my father's an educator. I grew up in the western part of New Jersey, a place called Patcon, small little town, close to the Pennsylvania border. But my father was born and raised and worked as a teacher in Newark. So all of my family on my father's side, that's where they're from. So I spent a lot of time in my younger years, my early years, probably from like birth to like 11 or 12. Almost every other weekend, I'd spend whole summers at my grandma's house, just kicking it. And the big joke in my family was that me and my cousins weren't really cousins, we were more like brothers. We were about a little under 2 years apart, and his father and my father were about in the same. And we took on our it's crazy, we took on our father's personalities in certain respects. I'm my own man. My father and I have some differences, but a lot of the things who I am, I realize I'm reflecting a lot of the things that he showed and taught me. And
let's pause for a second, if I may interject.
Sure.
I am becoming super aware and conscious of that within my own self.
Oh, for real? It's
my dad. Like, I'm like, yo, Dad, get off me for a second. I'm trying to do this different.
And the older I've gotten, it's even more stark to the point it's almost scary. Because it's that cliche. I don't want to be my parents. And then even just little mannerisms. I'm like, oh my God, how did I get to this? But I realized so many things that I believe in, from my work ethic to just how I want to work with young people. I realized I got all of that from him. Just who he was as a person and the things that he would talk to me about. So my cousin was very similar to his father. Talented, brilliant, definitely a little wild, definitely in the streets a little bit. But him and I had a bond like his father and my father. He introduced me to hip hop, and at that point I was already writing. I was writing poems, nothing with music. But I heard, and I gotta set this, 86, 87? 87. I'm in grandma's den, little red JVC boombox, 2 cassette deck, my cousin's, his prized possession at that age. And we're sitting around, it's a Friday night, Chuck Chill Out, 98.7 Kiss,
Wow.
listening to the show.
Wow.
And all of a sudden you just hear, today's topic, self-destruction. It really ain't the rap audience that's bugging. It's one or two brothers, ignorant suckers, trying to rob and steal from one another. You get caught in the midst. So to crush that stereotype, here's what we did. We got to get together so that we can unite and fight for what's right. And I was like, what is this? And I'm listening to the song, and that's KRS-One. He starts it off. It's just ice. it's MC Light. You're going down the road, and a few weeks later, maybe it was longer than, maybe it was a few months later, I actually saw the video. And it really hit me, and I'm just like, yo, they're talking about all of these things that my cousin kind of showed me, running around with him and just seeing some things, but I was just drawn to it because what they were spitting and how they were just creating just this experience, this feel. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that, and I was really drawn to Chuck at the end, KRS in the beginning, and Kumo D. And them in particular in that song. I mean, Daddy O does his thing, Just Ice does his thing, MC Light's killing it. No one's a slouch on that.
Right,
on that
that's
record.
a fact. Yep.
Check out "Stop the Violence, Self-Destruction" is the name of the song. For those that don't know, it's back. We're talking the '80s.
Yo, speaking of back, but we need to bring that back.
Well,
we need to do a 21st century version joint.
You know what? We do, and I think and I use this song and I talk about this song. I actually had the pleasure and the honor to be asked to be one of the writers for the St. James Hip Hop Culture Encyclopedia about.
Oh, that's lit. Yeah.
And they actually assigned to me "Stop the Violence" as one of the entries in this. So I actually got to do some heavy research and learned about some things that I didn't even know had happened, like. Nelson George actually wrote an entire book and curriculum around that was taught in New York City schools. I'd never heard that before. I did not know that at all. But I always give the context of, politically, socially speaking, they were talking about something that now, and we always have the hindsight of history, so, they're talking about black on black crime, right? So we understand like intraracial violence, and we understand the socio-political forces at play that to create the environment and create the conditions that causes individuals out of means of survival and also out of means of despair to basically attack one another. And that song was more thinking we gotta stop this violence on our own. And it's really like, well, no, the deeper read is we have to understand that the conditions that we've been placed in are helping to facilitate this type of thing, because I will challenge anyone. If you put anyone in inhuman and subhuman conditions, you will lose your humanity.
That's a fact.
You know what I'm saying? So with all of that said, absolutely, like just the social consciousness and to speak about it thoughtfully, deeply, and not make you fall asleep and get bored because someone's just kind of droning in your ear preaching. Absolutely, we need more of that in the music. I mean, that's why I love people like Kendrick, Rhapsody, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, like, yeah, man, like even if we're talking right now, like, I've just always been geeked off the culture.
So I'm loving this because we're going in, and it's like I didn't even need to give you the layup because you just slide right into it, right? Pause. I want to talk about, because you mentioned a lot of stuff there, and I'm going to unpackage this,
sure.
Right? Hip hop, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm trying to remember. So when I was working on my doctorate, I was doing a lot of ethnographic, anthropological work, but on hip hop, right?
Sure.
And I invited you to come to the Bronx because I was doing some, data research on seeing if hip hop is spiritual, right? Does it have purpose?
Yeah.
And it became this space, and we were just talking off camera of intersectionality of all of these moving pieces that are fighting against the machine. You had organizers, artists, parents. When I first heard you, I was like, oh, that's why he calls himself Hired Gun, because he goes bow, 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 bow. Like, and I'm not talking about bow, bow in Spanish or hitting a kid for being disobedient. I'm talking about you just... I remember because there was a lot of people and there was a lot of stuff happening, but when you went, I had to pause and I looked at this dude. I'm like, yo, this dude is what? So what's an MC, yo?
Wow.
Can we just go? Like, I'm gonna jump.
We can. Yo, this, I gotta tell you, brother. The synergy of this conversation right now. I gotta let people know. So.
Yeah, maybe that was too much, and I just jumped right into the question.
No. I'm gonna tell you why you're right on time. So today, I'm actually working with a group of young people. I've been working at the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music in addition to
Shout out.
I'm always an educator, like I was saying before. So even though that I've largely been doing administrative work in the education department at BAM, facilitating and making sure teaching artists have what they need for the programs that I'm running and creating and curating the hip hop event Word Sound Power there, I still teach. I have to. At every role, when I was at Urban Word as a program director, I always taught. I feel that if you're going to be in education, I don't care what your title, responsibility, or role is. If you are not in a classroom on some level, it's like anything, man. You get rusty. You lose the feel.
That's right.
You lose the feel. So and that's really the work. But I'm teaching a workshop, and it's about what is the MC. So you right on time. Man, listen. So I'm gonna keep it classic. An MC really is those words. Master of ceremonies. I also say it's master of the craft. On some level, we could say mindfulness and consciousness. We could even go there.
I had one previous guest, Jamel Rockwell, formerly known as South Kills.
Shout out
to the guy. You know what he said at MC is?
What he said?
Motivational creators.
All of that. Exactly. As an MC, now we're going back to the younger self. So, for me, when I thought of an MC, when I was younger, it was sort of this idea around these sort of like 5 truths. You could freestyle, clearly. You could write a song. You had the ability to rock a party, right? You were that parallel to a DJ, right? Because a DJ was someone who had the ill technical ability to cut, could scratch, and all of that. But if they needed to, they could go all it out and just rock jams to keep you moving the whole night long. I remember there used to be a little bit of a schism for a while in the turntablist community around that. Like, okay, so you got all the crash, scratch, and transforming, but can you actually just get people on the floor and just get them dancing? So there's always this, it's this more holistic thing. So there's freestyle. You have to be able to write a song. You have to know how to rock the party, and then that be a great live performer. But you got to be saying something for me. You do. You have to. You have to. I love lyrics and lyricism, and that doesn't mean that you're doing multi-syllable, 30 million miles a minute rapping. That doesn't have to be it, because that's almost like tricks, right? Have them in your bag. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about, and this kind of goes back to the idea of those 5 things for songwriting of, and really what rocking a part is like, move the crowd. What's gonna move you, right? Doesn't have to be political. Doesn't have to be quote unquote conscious. But you got to speak to something in here and in here. However that is, you have to be speaking truth on some level. That to me is an MC. It's the individual that can tell stories, that can speak truth, and that can do it in a way that gets you connected, gets you energized. Screw fake. You know what I mean? All of a sudden you pop it. That's an MC. The technical skills of rapping predate and pre-exist rappers, and hip hop, right? We know this. You don't have to be a musicologist directly to understand that. The idea of rhyming words rhythmically is not something that was invented by hip hop. What hip hop did was, like with all things, Grandmaster Caz said this, and it's become one of the most guiding mantras. And I've had the honor and pleasure of meeting that brother.
Yeah, shout out to the guy.
Shout out to Caz.
Yeah.
Caz is one of the illest ever.
And shout out to hip hop, the Hush Tours too. That he leads that joint.
He does. Hip hop didn't invent anything.
It
Reinvented everything. And that to me is such a critical part of hip hop, is this idea of innovation and evolution. And it speaks to a lot of what black and brown communities always have. Is take. I mean, I won't blow up your spot, but we came here, or you came here to my home.
And where we at? What borough we in?
We are in Brooklyn.
Shout out to BK.
21 years strong.
Yes,
so,
sir.
My man's got the full. I mean, we're in a TV studio right now. Like this is me and my wife's living room. We're in a TV studio right now. But right now, this brother got a couple of my 7.5 pound weights as stands for the mic. And I only wanted to bring it up because we're always creating something from nothing. We're always taking the resources that we have at our disposal and repurposing them and reutilizing them for something else that is powerful, positive, constructive, and what's needed at the moment. We didn't need to wait right now. But what we did need is a way to put these mics together so that we could turn this room into a studio.
And I think, and I want to, this is, even unpackage this more, because you're touching on another very important thing. There's this phrase that's being circumnavigated amongst hip-hop, specifically in the school system, hip-hop pedagogy.
Yes.
We do this, and I don't think people understand what it is. Mm-hmm. And you're already really pretty much touching it, because all it is a style of teaching with a hip-hop flavor to it.
Yeah.
What is hip-hop pedagogy?
Man, listen, bro.
It's like rhetorical questions, so, but for those that are under a rock.
For real, y'all, I swear this was not pre-prep. He don't know nothing about, man, you right. Listen, this is a spiritual moment. I'm going to break this down for you. Hip-hop pedagogy. Going on 8 years now, I became a part of an amazing program, and one of the founders, Dr. Jamila Lescott.
Yes.
And Dr. Limaris Caballero. And they started a thing called Cyprus for Justice. And Cyprus for Justice, what it is a program that uses a particular research method called YPAR, Youth Participatory Action Research, to work with young people to think about deeply and thoughtfully research and finding solutions to social issues that speaks to them directly. And YPAR is a youth-centric, youth-driven, youth development model in how working with young people to develop them as researchers. I was asked.
That's what I'm talking about. Because, and I pause real quick.
Sure.
Rest in peace, Dr. Tyson.
Word.
He put together the first hip hop and psychology conference ever at Fordham. I was humbled to be a part of it.
Wow.
Where Dr. Daniel was a doctor in psychology, he's a clinician, and he said, We gotta document this. We need the data so we can use it in our communities, in our way, in our flavor, using without co-opting the culture to the best of our ability.
Sure.
But I wanted to interject that because I think it's so important when we talk about hip hop pedagogy. It's an intersectionality of different disciplines that can help the student be the best version of themselves.
Right. So I was asked to be the hip-hop facilitator in that project, which really what it meant was there was 3 art disciplines that Dr. Lescott, Dr. Caballero, they wanted to have the young people engaged with. Multimedia, so documentary filmmaking, podcasting, poetry, because Dr. Lescott is an amazing poet, spoken word artist, and we actually connected through Urban Word because we both were part of Urban Word.
Shout out to Urban Word.
Shout out to you, Doug. And obviously hip-hop because she's also a head. And she wanted someone that, could spit, but also was an educator, could kind of break down sort of the mechanics and the technical aspects of rapping to help young people when they produce their research project. In the presentation, they would utilize an art component to convey the findings that they had in part. So the idea was we can have young people become recognized, official scholars and researchers, but using a non-traditional method of presenting, but backed with the type of rigor that it takes for a researcher to have in order for that data to be authentic. But making sure that in that process they're guiding or rather they are the core and directing that process using this method, and we're acting as guides and servants to them in that process. So fast forward to 7 or 8 years now, and about 2.5 years ago, we sort of all of the information that we had been collecting with the different cohorts of high school students we've been working with in New York, largely at UME, the Institute of Urban Minority Education, which is on the campus of Columbia University, and Queens College, where Dr. Maurice is also located. And then there's also Dr. Filipiak, Danielle Filipiak, who also very early on became a part of that team, also with Joe Ferreira, who came a little bit later, and a service teacher by the name of MJ. And we kind of became sort of like the core of CFJ in terms of the facilitators. And we've taken that research, and there's a special issue of a journal that's going to be coming out in February, or now it's probably going to be March. But I wrote a paper around hip hop practice as pedagogy. So for me, what hip hop pedagogy, and I talk about it in the paper, for me what hip hop pedagogy is not just about an observation and sort of an immersion in the culture, but it's about learning and developing through the practice specifically of some aspect of the hip hop arts. You know, because oftentimes what hip hop pedagogy largely has been about is, let's, from a kind of bird's eye view or gaze, analyze hip hop music and then kind of like deconstruct and contextualize the content within it and allow that to raise questions that then we sort of kind of think about deeply and, you know, again, use as a means to kind of engage different issues. So, and part of that is because hip hop has become the predominant way in which youth around the world have chosen to express themselves through, it then also becomes a hook to bring young people into areas of study that they may or may not have a natural connection to or want to be a part of. And it's expanded to them thinking about, well, hip hop has its own culture, so there's a philosophy to it. So how can we use that philosophy, this is something CFJ is about, how can we use that philosophy to inform the way in which we engage one another in the subject matter? My piece is taking it an even step further and say, if you're going to use hip hop as a means of teaching, then what you need to do, in my opinion, the closest you can get to, the most authentic, in my opinion, you get to it, is when you are actually participating in the practice of the art forms, be they DJing, beatboxing, emceeing, breaking, graph, right? Now, that may not always work in a lot of traditional spaces, or you'll have to do other things in addition to. But my entire career, and I've been an educator for 15 years, I've taught high school, I've taught middle school as a teaching artist.
Right.
I've taught in Brazil, I've taught in Africa, Nepal, Germany.
Facts. Yeah.
All through hip hop and all looking at, okay, we're going to write rhymes, we're going to storytell, but you're going to understand meaning making. You're going to understand problem solving. You're going to develop a process of analyzing and critique through the process of understanding how to write a song. And it's not to say, again, hip hop didn't invent how to do but it innovated a way in which it brings more young people in and gives them an alternative way to engage not just scholarly work, but just learning. And that to me is hip hop pedagogy. That is the core and essence of it. So in 2008 or 9, and this is about 2 or 3 years before I became a part of CFJ, I started Fresh Fruits Music, which initially was really just a way to independent artists, to get my music out. That was the idea. At that point, I didn't have the synergy idea of I was a teaching artist, but I wasn't thinking about it in the same way. The irony of it was that, so if we're going all the way back to your original question, the younger hired gun, which in 2008, 2009, I actually started to transition. Well, really more like 2011, around the time CFJ, I started to transition. So now I go by my given name and my middle name, Mikal, Amin. So hired gun is still in there. But I now go by Mikal Amin on the mic in my work. But in Fresh Roots Music, I realized that there's 3 main components that I connect to within the culture or within hip hop, and that is roots, truth, and culture. I've kind of extrapolated those. I wouldn't even call them pillars per se, but those are sort of the core components of what I've pulled from my practice in the culture, and I try to infuse my work with young people in those kind of three areas. So when we're thinking about roots, we're thinking about what is the origins of something, what is the origins of you, what is the origins of this problem, what is the root of the problem. Truth is truth. It's funny. There's a phrase we all know in hip hop: keeping it real, right?
Keep it real, son.
Keep it real. And that has a lot of different connotations to it. But what I've always felt about keep it real was something that Raekwon said: be original, right? So truth is really about what and where and how you move, act, relate, where you're from. And more importantly, when we sort of engage in inquiry, what is the truth? We just came out of 4 years of a lot of untruth, right?
Speak on it.
We're dealing with a country that was born of a lot of untruth. You have white supremacy that would tell you that the core of existence and the superior of human existence is Anglo-Saxon European. It's not true. So when I think about truth and I think about hip hop and I think about some of the, which may not necessarily be as universal as it once was because the culture has become so wide, but it's still, to me, it's a core of it. It's always yo, son, if you're not a gangster, don't talk that. If you're not from this place, don't talk that. Be you. And that's why the culture's become so global and so universal, because it wasn't about everybody trying to act as if they're from the South Bronx, or they're from Brooklyn, or they're from Compton. In a lot of ways, that can get you killed.
Heard up.
You know what I'm saying? So what it really was about is when you really had that respect and you really got recognized was when you were you, but it was always the key of, but you had to be dope. So I come from that standpoint, from a youth development standpoint. And then obviously culture. And, the way that I define culture, it's the shared practices, ideals, rituals of a group, right? For me, that's culture. So when I'm thinking about that with young people in the classroom and in the confines and the context of, well, we're trying to put this project together, or we're going on this journey to learn about X or understand Y, what can we do as a group to create an environment where we're connected, where we're motivated, where we're energized, where we feel seen, heard, respected.
Safe space.
And that's practice, right?
Yeah.
That's practice, and we develop that together. So even just small ideas of camaraderie, one of the things that was really fun, and it was actually really cool when I was teaching in Germany, Dortmund University, Dortmunder U is the arts institution. Shout out to Dr. Tina Michki, the mental child. In
Shout out to
Dortmund.
Germany,
Shout out
yo.
to Germany and Schlatz. It was really cool, man. They had me working with, and it'd been a while, so it was fun. I was working with largely middle school students, because I generally work with high school students now for the last 10 or 12 years. But I was working with like 5th, 6th, 7th graders. And I didn't make them, but like I introduced this idea of like, okay, well, we're doing hip hop, so we got to be a crew. So it's the U crew, and there's 6 of them, and it was so dope because, you know, the one thing that I'm really the U crew, and the one thing I'm really humbled by, you know, I've had the honor, I've had the pleasure to travel and do not just perform in other parts of the world, but also educate and teach.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a deeply, deeply humbling experience because when you're coming from New York City as a hip hop artist to a place where they also have a strong hip hop culture, they look at you in this reference where, like, I felt a responsibility always. Every time I stepped outside of the United States and stepped on, you know, the soil in Brazil or France, I really felt this, like, I gotta represent. Not just because, like, okay, so I gotta be able to spit, I gotta have fire, I gotta be dope because I'm from Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Like, there's an expectation there, which I humbly took. But it also made me realize, like, yeah, I really wanna make sure that I'm representing the culture properly. I want to make sure that I'm representing myself properly. So, like, I was like, listen, we you know, let's. We only got a week to do these songs. Let's get into a space, not just where we're all like, cool, we're a crew. Because when you're a crew, that's your fan. And when you're a fan, you hold each other down. So whether it's helping them with lyrics, whether it's being the cheerleader for them when they're working on their stuff and recording, you know, keeping each other accountable. So we kind of went through some things that first day, some exercises, some other cool stuff. And one, I had them all name themselves, so they all came up with like their rap name, their pseudonym, and we talked about, like, you know, again, it's funny you were bringing up the hired gun. So, like, you know, at the time when I changed my name, so I'm always big into acronyms. So when I was young, it was G-Rock and the G-R-O-C, G-R-O-C, and it was an acronym for Genuine Rocker of Crowds. Now, I had that title way before I actually earned it, so that's a whole nother thing. I wasn't, you know, but I was like, that's what I represent. I'm a genuine rocker, G-Rock. So, you know, in the 2000s, like, all right, I gotta change this. But it was still like, at the time, I was producing events. I was emceeing all over the place, but I also was emceeing not just at hip hop joints. I was in the drum and bass and jungle community. I had a crew called Black Ops. I was doing live music, working with bands. I was just doing a little bit of everything. I actually was in a modern dance troupe. Shouts out to Malifwis and Don Crandall, who brought me in a long time ago. Actually, Bob, you know, through kind of met her first, but like there's a connection with Bobby Israel there as well. And I was just doing so many things. So I was like, I feel like I'm kind of like a mercenary. I'm this person that if you need a job, if it's about getting people together, it's about rocking. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it could be on some a djembe, it could be on bongos, it could be guitar, it could be turntables, it could be in a warehouse, it could be, you know, on a huge stage. It doesn't matter. Like, you're gonna call me to do it. So then I became, you know, the hired gun.
And that was the time that we
that
met and built.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you this question because you brought up some important stuff. Yeah. Like I always like the phrase in the culture where they said, you know, now, you know, hip hop has provided me an opportunity to change the weather, you know, to go in different places in the world and stuff like that. Yeah. But I want to know from you, right? Because you're coming from the urban word camp, you're a lyrical monster. We had a urban word alum queen do her thing at the inauguration. Mm-hmm. Her name is slipping off me again. Amanda. It was Amanda. Shout out to her. What's your message to the young people, man?
Wow. I just want them to know that they're loved, that they're respected, And to stay courageous, I guess. I think, I'm 43, I'm going to be 44 in April. And
April what?
16th.
That's why you and I connect. April 9th.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
Shout out to the Aries, yo.
Aries. The thing that I've really, and it's almost like a daily battle. To maintain that, it's become almost a cliche now, but that inner child, the inner youth. And it's not about so I can run around and be crazy, but it's more about the optimism, the courage to try and do things even when you don't know if you can. That resiliency. And that lack, that flexibility. I think, unfortunately, the gift and the curse of age is experience, right? Because experience teaches us. That's what wisdom is. But depending on the situation that you might be in, that experience could also put you in a place where you almost protect yourself too much, right? When we're thinking about trauma, right? Things that we haven't been able to fully process or deal with, or the realities that are kind of put in front of us that might not be fully true, right? Because we all have amazing gifts. They're different, they're unique. When we feel, in my opinion, when we feel grounded, when we feel loved, when we feel excited, motivated, anything is possible.
Speak on it.
You know what I'm saying?
Speak on it. I always say, you got to give the young people something to believe, Mikal.
Well, and
you could be that factor, you know?
It's funny. I am honestly, Walter, I feel like it's almost been the reverse. They give me something to believe in. Because when I look at the planet, when I think, all you got to do, I don't even have to speak on anybody else's situation. I can look at the United States and go, look at what the adults have done. Look at what we have done. Look at what we've done. Look at the violence we've wrought. Look at the inaction that we have. The lack of foresight, the lack of imagination for issues and problems that are generational. We're still dealing with the same things that our fathers and their fathers and their mothers and their mothers and on and on and on. We are dealing with old, decrepit, antiquated problems.
Super facts.
You know what I'm saying? And we still haven't figured out the basic simpleness of humaneness. And we can talk about hierarchy, we can talk about oppression, we can talk about systems of oppression, we can talk about all of those things. And all of those things are factored in. You have to give proper context, for sure. It's a lot more complex than I might be just saying right now, for sure. But I'm a big person about responsibility. And off mic earlier, we were just talking about characters. Not what you do, what you do after. That's character.
Yeah,
because we make flaws, or we make mistakes. We have flaws. We're human. We're not perfect. At some point, we have to take responsibility for the things that we do, the actions we take, or the lack of action that we have. When I see young people, most of the young people that I have met, they are down and ready. Down and ready. There are ways in which that we absolutely bring guidance. But the thing that I want to say to you, like I said, is just stay courageous, stay brave. Know that the ways in which you're moving, it's the right way. And I feel as I get older and I'm realizing the roles that elders in my life have played have not been to squash that, but to guide that, to give insight and experience that I hadn't had the time yet to have. Not as a means to make me retract or be lesser or to follow completely in their way, but to give me a little bit of a jump start on that wisdom. to give me the encouragement to continue. So I see myself, the older I become in that role. It's crazy. I have a young woman that I've been a mentor of for a long time now. She's originally from Urban Word. And, I joke with my wife. She actually makes the joke as well. We don't have biological children yet. But she's like, you have all these kids. Like, she's more like my daughter, this young woman. And she's a brilliant mind. She's always been brilliant, an amazing artist and poet. And she's now actually getting her master's at the University of Michigan.
Beautiful.
So about a month ago, she calls me up and she's like, Mikal, so I figured out, and she's always, she's a polymath. I'll say it. Everything she does is brilliant. Everything she does is brilliant. And she's like, I'm teaching my first workshop in a couple of weeks. And what are you talking about? It's like, so, my mentor here at the University of Michigan, he's doing this workshop program with after school kids, and it's like beat making and songwriting. He wants me to do the songwriting piece. And I'm like, and I was just like, are you serious? I'm like, I was just in awe. This is so dope. She's like, yo, help me out. I'm trying to think about some games, or how should I approach? I'm so nervous. And then I'm just like, it's the full circle. Because I saw the seeds of what she's doing now planted when she was 16. And we were in workshop together, and she was, we were doing poetry, and then watching her kind of, become a young adult, and watching her kind of go the path that I was going as an artist in New York. And we've always stayed in contact, and just asking for advice or looking for some encouragement, and more than happy to. You're just amazing, you're brilliant, I want you to succeed. And I realized that's why I became a teaching artist, and that's the role that I feel we as adults need to play. It's how do we facilitate and support their greatness, so that hopefully that they can do that and then reciprocate that down the line. And I think one of the toughest challenges that I've seen, and one of the biggest reasons why I feel that we're having so many problems in the world, is because this natural connection, right? I believe everything's a continuum. I've grown into this. I didn't always think this way, but I no longer have this old is better, new is better. No. Everything is a cycle and a circle. Everything needs to be in connection, in unity, in conversation. So we're at a disconnect. We're in trouble when younger generations aren't in a relationship and in conversation with prior generations. Prior generations run the risk of becoming irrelevant, becoming ineffectual, if they're not continuing to find ways to renew what they understand and know through the young people and what's happening now. So there's supposed to be this natural way that we're all in relation, that for whatever reasons, modern society, technology, whatever it is, we don't have. And it's critical because we're not immortal. Someone's going to step into my shoes. Someone's going to step into your shoes. Someone's going to... Amanda Gorman could potentially be Kamala Harris in 30 years. Or Obama.
Facts.
In 30 years. So, you said it before. It's what are we downloading into our children, right? What are we exposing them to? But more importantly, it's what are the conversations are we having in them or with them? And what are we are we putting love into them? Are we respecting them? I tell educators all the time, I'm like, because sometimes I'll talk to some teachers and they'll be amazed, how are you able to connect with young people? How are you able to sort of have these relationships with them and move with them, and young people kind of see you in this particular way, and you have all of this sort of just bond with them, and can kind of really guide them in a way that other adults seem to have this struggle with. And I tell them, I hate to burst your bubble or like make it seem it's just this, but it really is. It's like I respect them. And I'm consistent with that. And I understand that if I want you to respect me, if I want you to see me as someone that you want to listen to, that you want to get information from, you have to feel like, well, this person values me too. And it's a critical piece that a lot of adults and many educators sadly don't realize. Like, because we have this sort of, we get into the whole philosophy with Freire and top down in the banking system and all of those things that many people in education know and pedagogy of the oppressed and all of those things. But it really is a situation where every time I step into a classroom, my main aim, priority one, is to foster a feeling that these young people know that I'm here in service to them, and that I have a deep respect already for their experience and what they're going to bring into the classroom. And I'm just adding mine to the pot. Now,
Word.
You've done massive amounts of work in a myriad of fields, spirituality, hip hop, all of these things, right? There's a vast wealth of knowledge that I don't necessarily have, right? I want to know that, right? I want to get to know that. I want to understand that. And I'm sure conversely there's some certain things about hip hop and literature and poetry that I might have a little bit on you too, right? We can't get to that if I'm not respecting your journey, if I'm not respecting the work you've done, if I'm not respecting who you are, and vice versa. And that's how we learn. And I think that is the only way that we can really have an impact with young people. So my whole thing is, before we even get into what I know, and I ain't gonna lie, like, I've been doing this for a little bit. I'm probably gonna blow your mind. You know what I mean? I'm probably gonna blow your mind. But I can't start there. Mm-hmm. We got to start with, what are y'all into? Let's figure out who you are. I want to know who you are. I want to know how you tick. I want to give you space. I want you to respect, or I want you to know that I respect where you're coming from. So I need to know you first. And then, more times than not, I am like, yo, that's amazing what you just shared. That's amazing how you see this. Check this out. Let me throw mine in the pot for you, because I see how this is going to connect. And it almost every single time, you're like, what? And
exactly.
It's like, you know what I mean? Now we're all in. Now you're all ears. You're ready. You're like, what do you got? And it's like, what do you got? And then we build from there. And then a whole other level of trust. And now we can have. I it's funny. Going back to Urban Word. One of the things that's a huge thing, and I don't think anybody does this still. We were never called teaching artists. We never called teachers. We were that. We're called mentors. Mm-hmm. For me, that title holds a lot more weight. Mm. Because there's a responsibility there, right? It's not just about being the holder of the knowledge. It's not about being the authority. It's about you have a responsibility to help grow and develop whom is within your steed, which means that you have to be on a certain level as a person where you're growing, where you're leading by following. We've got a lot of things messed up, especially in the Western world. Leadership is not about, like, that silly little meme where it's got the lead from the front or lead from behind. Like, are you the one, like, doing this thing from the front line, or you sitting back and letting other people do stuff? And it's just like, but it's true. It's like, the best leaders are those that are in service. We don't have that type of model, right? In the United States, for real. We think leadership means whatever I say goes. And our education system's like that. And as a teacher, I think that's to your detriment, because your goal is to get these young people to a place where that they can be the best, fullest self that they can possibly be.
Super facts.
You know what I'm saying?
And I think that speaks to a lot of the work that you do. And all of this sounds great, but you know what? What we want to know is what's coming out of your shelf, though, my brother.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, like, we can take it however you want to take it, man. I mean, like, you know, one of the things I've been doing recently is I recently became an associate editor for an academic journal, Words, Beats, and Life. And one of the first things they asked me to do and curate, shout out to Mazi Mustafa, who is the founder, and Dennis Winston, the executive editor. They asked me to do a Brazil hip hop mixtape with DJ Painter, who was a dope DJ down in DC.
Lit.
So that's the next thing that's coming out that I'm sort of a part of. So what we did is that, you know, I'm you know, my wife Dale, she loves to give me massive, huge titles. Sometimes I'm a little nervous, but she's like, you know, you're a hip hop historian. I'm a fan of history. I'm a fan of history. Because that's a big load. But what I wanted to do with this mixtape with Painter was when we sat down and talked about what we were going to do, because he's mixing it obviously. You know, I told him, I said, you know, I want to give a loose timeline of what Brazil hip hop sounded like and what it is currently. I'm looking at it in a very classic mixtape sense of, if you had never heard of a single artist from Brazil, if you didn't even know hip hop in Brazil existed, wouldn't you want to know as much of the story as possible? You wouldn't want to go to the last chapter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you might not have enough time to read, you know, the epilogue and the first chapter and get through. So let us think about how we can kind of give you moments in history. So we you know, thankfully, you know, shouts out to Ures Fundal, in Passo Fundal, Brazil, some homies out there, and DJ Zajaza, who I did a trip with in Brazil many moons ago, but that's still the fam. So I reached out to them, you know, obviously because they're Brazilian, and asked them and did my research, because I'd been there and knew some artists from being with them. But I did a little research and started to kind of like give Painter some songs that sort of kind of reflected, you know, kind of the earlier times. He'd been doing hip hop mixtapes and spinning a lot of Brazilian music already that was more modern. So he was coming from the now. So we kind of took the now and the before, kind of put it together in a mixtape. So like if you wanted to, like, hey, let me what is Brazilian hip hop? It's like, well, it's been here, it's here now, it's been in this phase, that phase, but still it's a flawless mix where you're listening to it and rocking with it. So that's on the shelf right now. Not necessarily a book, maybe some vinyl, and you know, just been really doing more and more with Freshman's music. Been working on a couple music projects that hopefully are going to be coming out in another year or so. You know, the pandemic kind of really changed a lot of stuff. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, you know, the first 7 or 8 months, man, I really wasn't in a frame to create or be productive. Wow. I was more on some like, what's going on? You know, I kind of went into a state,
stepping back, reflective.
Yeah, very much so. So it was, and genuinely, it was hard. It was, to be honest with you, one of the first biggest catalysts and motivator for me to even start writing was my wife. She was doing basically an online challenge. So she's a trained yogi, and she does a lot of work around like physical, spiritual wellness. And utilizing music and art to sort of facilitate that. That
sounds like someone I want to holler at.
Yeah, we got you. So she decided to do this challenge where she was relating each of the chakras by their colors and asking artists to think about those chakras and then produce something around chakras.
I gotta holla at her.
Yeah, and we jumped into it, or she jumped into it. But when she started doing it, I was like, oh, and your partners who want to support. So I was like, oh, I'll throw some stuff down, of course. And all of a sudden, like, dope. I was like, oh, this is this, and then and that's always how creation works, right? Like, Jay-Z said something about this on the Black album, on the documentary. He was just like, the worst thing you can do, and I'm paraphrasing, because the worst thing you can do is think, making music. It's gotta feel, Sure, you have to kind of like plan things down and break things down once sort of the spark happens. But if you don't got the spark, and you're just making stuff, and it's just all here, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. We're as much here and here as we are here. Those things, all continue, all gotta be in some type of alignment, right? So she really tapped into that for me, and that actually got my gears going again. Just that practice. Just like, okay, so we're doing red chakra, okay, we're doing the heart chakra, okay, that's green. And all of a sudden, the pen just start going. So been working on that, and like I said, this hip hop pedagogy or hip hop practices pedagogy is a paper that's going to be published.
And where can people find you, Mikal? What's your information? If they want to reach out, if someone is looking for something to implement into their classroom or after school, this is someone to holler at.
For sure. I mean, I'm on any of the platforms. If you want to check me on Instagram, it's my name, Mikal, Amin, Mikal, AMIN_FR. But if you just type in Mikal Amin, you'll find me. FreshRootsMusic.com and FreshRoots.bandcamp.com. Those are the places where you can find music. And info at Fresh Roots Music.
Bomb, there we go.
That's it. Just email me, and there you go.
Wow, man. Just I love this one because I felt like I could just keep asking, but I really wanted the educator, the MC educator right here, just to talk and let them know what's really happening out here, you know. And amidst this pandemic, thank God for the internet and all these other mediums and platforms, so that we can continue to touch the young people in the way that you continue to do that. But as we always do, before we wrap up, I just want to say, man, I am so proud of you, King.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
We don't tell each other enough that we're proud. As Nori says, and people of the culture, shout out to the drink champs. We got to give flowers to the people while they're still alive. And this human being, this brother, deserves so many flowers because of the work that you do, what you do for our young people.
Thank you, man.
You know what I'm saying? So, so important. As we always do, we end with a quote, and this comes from John Quincy Adams. I was hesitant, but I got to remind myself, at least what they say in history, he's the one of the only that didn't enslave anyone. The others did, the first 10.
Right.
But this quote comes from him, and it reads as such. And God is, when you talk about how the spirit moves, right? This is fitting right here. If your actions inspires others to dream more, learn more, and become more, you're a leader. Peace, family.
Peace. My man. Yes.